Hello there, champions. Mr. Chambers here, coming from my library. I'm sitting here on the floor, surrounded by books, about to embark on our next literature study book. Last time what I did was I recorded myself and I recorded the text available so that you can follow along with the words as I was reading. For this book, I'm going to try something new. I'm going to record myself reading, but if you want to read along, there will be a separate PDF file. And so you can either listen to Mr. Chambers read, you can listen to Mr. Chambers read and read along, or you can read the story as it is at your own pace. Each time there will still be a few questions to answer. We are going to do slightly longer readings. Each day I'm going to aim for 2 chapters that I read through. I'll read through 2 chapters in the same video, so there might be a little longer than the 5-10 minutes we were doing with One Day in the Desert. But there will still just be 5 to 10 questions to answer. You can look ahead at the questions before watching the video to make sure you know what you're looking for or what you're listening for. And so yeah, that's the plan. You can either watch the video and listen to Mr. Chambers read, you can watch the video and read along with the PDF, or you can read the PDF and answer the questions as you want. The choice is yours. Okay, so this is the second literature study book of the school year, and the story is Sing Down the Moon by Scott Odell. Before I get into reading it, I always find that it's helpful when we're starting a new book to glance over and read the brief synopsis that's provided on the back, just so we have a general idea of what to expect as we move forward into the story. On a beautiful spring morning, while grazing their sheep, Bright Morning and her friend Running Bird see 2 men coming toward them. Right away, Bright Morning knows who the men are. They are slavers come to the Navajo country to steal girls and to sell them to families in town. In minutes, both girls are caught and taken away. But Bright Morning does not give up trying to escape, and eventually she finds her way back home. What Bright Morning can't know, though, is that the entire Navajo way of life is about to change forever. So, those are some plot points and a synopsis to engage the reader before we get into the story. We already know that we have Bright Morning. She's going to be kidnapped by people who want to make her into a slave to work for other people. We also know that she's Navajo or Native American and that her way of life might change. Okay? So, on this book, we have this Newbery Award for literature. And a lot of books that you read throughout school will have this Newbery Honor Medal. It's groundbreaking for one reason or another. It's a good book. So, hopefully you enjoy it as much as I do as I read through. And again, you can either listen to me read and read along using the PDF, or just read on your own. We're going to do chapters 1 and chapters 2 today in our reading. Chapter 1. On the high mesas above our canyon spring came early that year. The pinyon trees shook off their coverings of snow in the month of the deer. Warm winds melted the snow, and blue water gathered under the trees and ran through the meadows and down the steep barrancas. Far to the north, where the stone walls of the canyon stand so close together that you can touch them with your outstretched hands, the waters met and flowed toward the south, past Spider Rock and Lost Sheep Mountain. At last, in a big loop, past our village. The day the waters came was a wonderful day. I heard the first sounds of their coming while I lay awake in the night. At first, it was a whisper, like a wind among the dry stalks of our cornfield. After a while, it sounded like the feet of warriors dancing. Then it was a roar that shook the earth. I could hardly wait until the sun rose. When the first light showed in the east, I hurried out to see the river was running. My father and mother and my sister Lapana had seen early springs many times before, so they were sleeping. I stood alone in the orchard where the peaches grow. It was a miracle. Yesterday there was nothing to see save bare trees and wide stretches of yellow sand. In one night, everything had changed. The trees had begun to bud, and the sand lay deep under blue, rushing water. I felt like singing. I wanted to leap and dance with joy, yet I stood quietly and watched the river running between the greening cottonwood trees, for I knew that it is bad luck to be so happy. The gods do not like anyone to show happiness in this way, and they punish those who do not obey them. They punished my brother. They let the lightning strike him when he was coming home from a hunt. My brother had shot a 6-pronged deer and was singing because it was the first deer with 6 prongs that anyone had shot that summer. The lightning struck him, and he died. Thinking of my brother, I stood quiet. No one could tell how I felt. Yet it was hard for me to do. It was very hard because now that spring had come, I would have another chance to take our sheep up the long trail to the mesa. I had driven them there once before. Last year, on the day the waters began to run, but it was a bad time for me. I thought of that spring now. It was not so hard any longer to stand quiet and to think about. I was happy going up the trail that day last spring with sheep bells ringing and the sheep white in their winter coats, hungry to reach spring pasture. When we left the trail, it was fun to see them scatter out over the meadow to crop the first young grass, as though they had never eaten it in their lives. It was fun all morning and some of the afternoon. Then white clouds came up, but after a while they turned black. It was then I should have left the meadow and driven the flock down to the trail to home. This I should have done, as any good shepherd knows. What I did was wrong. I waited, thinking that the black clouds would go away, or that if a storm came, it would be a small one. The storm was not small. At first it only rained, and I herded the flock into an aspen grove for shelter against the wind that had grown cold. Then it began to snow. I had never been afraid before, or only once. That was when I saw my grandfather, who had been dead for a long time, walking around. It was a night, just like the one last spring, with snow and a cold wind blowing. He came right out of the trees in the falling snow and walked toward me and called my name. That happened when I was 10 years old. Now, I was 14. I should not have been afraid. But I was. I thought about how warm it would be in our house that has thick mud walls and a door so small that you have to crawl on your hands and knees to go through it. The sheep were safe under the shelter of the aspen trees. They would not freeze in their thick wool coats, and in the morning I would come back. I left them, and I went down the trail. At the bottom of the canyon, the snow was not falling. I crawled through the door. My father and mother and my sister, who were sitting around the fire, looked at me, at my muddy feet and wet clothes and my long hair that was covered with snow. They knew that something was wrong. Lapana, my sister said. We could see the storm gathering on the mesa. Lapana was only 2 years older than I, but she talked as though she were 10 years older. We thought you had come home before the storm, my father said. Where are my sheep? My mother said. She thought of the sheep because they were hers. In the tribe I belong to, the Navajos, sheep are mostly owned by the women. It was right, therefore, that she should think of the sheep first. They are safe, I said. Where? Lapana said. I'm listening, my mother said, but I hear no sheep bells. All of them knew that I had left the sheep on the mesa, though they did not know why. The sheep are in the aspen grove, I said. You left them because you got scared, Lapana said. The storm scared you. My mother said nothing. She rose from the fire and found 2 blankets and put one around her shoulders and gave the other to me. She went outside and I followed her. We crossed the stream and climbed the trail. Snow was still falling on the mesa, but the sheep were safe, deep in the aspen grove. We cleared a place and sat down near them and wrapped ourselves in the blankets. It was a long night because my mother did not speak to me. Nor did she speak when morning came and we drove the flock down the trail and across the river into the brush coral. Nor did she ever speak of that night. But all the rest of the spring and during the summer and fall, she would not let me take the flock to the mesa. Now, a new spring had come. I could not wait until my mother was awake and I could ask her about the sheep. Chapter 2. I did not have to wait long, and I had no need to tell my mother that another spring had come and I wanted to take the sheep up to the mesa. Nor say that I had learned in the days between the 2 springs that a herder of sheep does not leave the flock to fend for itself, whether from fear of storms or wild animals or for any reason. She was waiting at the gate of the corral when I came back from the river. The grass is better to the south, beyond the aspen, she said. It is still watery and thin, but the sheep will find it good after a winter of mesquite. She gave me a strip of dried deer to eat at noon and waited while I drove the sheep out of the corral and across the river. As I reached the trail, she waved to me. The trail to the mesa is steep and follows a wooded draw and then cuts back and forth for a long time. It is the only trail out of the canyon for a distance of 2 leagues. Our men use it when they go scouting or when they go to hunt. Because the trail is steep, it is easy to defend if warriors from the west come to raid our canyon. We reached the mesa when the sun was lance high in the east, long before the other girls from our village came, which pleased me. The sheep were cropping in the short grass, and my dog sat watching, while when White Deer came up the trail with her flock, I smiled and welcomed her, which was my right because I had been the first to reach the mesa. We both smiled and greeted Running Bird, who did not come until most of the grass had been cropped from the south meadow. But at noon, the 3 of us ate together while our flocks grazed. Have you heard, said Running Bird, that the twins are ill? They are always ill, White Deer said. Neither of them has any strength, Running Bird said. It would be wiser if there was only one of the twins instead of 2. There is not enough strength to divide between them. Would you like to have twin babies when you are married? White Deer said to me. I have never thought of this, I said, not telling the truth. She thinks of it all the time, Running Bird said. She is too thin to have twins, White Deer said. She is thin because she eats nothing, said Running Bird. They were joking with me. I'm not thin, and I eat a lot. My sister says that I eat like a man, but this joking is our custom. I mean, only yesterday my father got a new horse. When he jumped on its back and rode proudly back and forth to show off, my uncle laughed. Your feet touch the ground, he said. Either the legs of your new horse are too short, or your legs, dear brother, are too long. We like to joke with each other in this way, so I was not displeased at what my two friends said about me. I thought of something to pay them back, but before I could say it, Running Bird spoke. It is possible that our friend will never be married, she said. Who wants a girl who has arms that look like sticks? Oh, White Deer said. Some poor man may marry her. He will see that she eats little and think it will not matter whether he is poor or not. More likely he will see that her mother owns many sheep, Running Bird said. Yes, most young men dream of mothers-in-law with many sheep, White Deer said. But I do not think that Tallboy is one of those dreamers, Running Bird said. Do you? I was a healthy girl and good at weaving, but I was not pretty like my two friends. Many people thought that the only reason that Tallboy's parents wanted him to marry me was because my mother owned many sheep. It does not matter what others think. White Deer said, Tallboy will marry her only because she is pretty and obedient. And eats so little, Running Bird said. My sheep were grazing nearby. I listened to the sound of their teeth as they sheared the long grass. I looked at the sky, which was blue, and listened to the far-off sound of moving water. My friends waited for me to answer them. They wanted me to talk about Tallboy, who in the morning would be riding west out with the warriors. White Deer grew impatient at my silence. Tallboy is very brave, she said. Sometimes he is too brave, Running Bird said. They were goading me to speak, but still I kept silent. I got up, caught one of my sheep that was straying, and chased it back into the flock. When I sat down again with my friends, were whispering to each other. They acted as though I was not there. In the land of the Utes, the girls are beautiful, White Deer said. I have heard this from my father and brothers who have traveled there. It is true, said Running Bird. Once I saw a girl from that land. I was a child then, yet I have never forgotten. Perhaps Tallboy will bring one home, White Deer said. It is possible, said Running Bird. I raised my knees under my chin and rested my chin on them and watched the flocks gazing. After a while, I said to White Deer, 3 of your sheep have strayed? To Running Bird, I said, 1 of yours is eating poison weed. Then I felt better. That will conclude chapters 1 and 2 of Sing Down the Moon. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to me read, or you took the opportunity to read along with me. There will be 5 to 10 questions to answer and think about for this story. Thank you for tuning in and listening, and I'll talk to you real soon.